Hi and welcome to the midterm explanation video. If you're anything like me, you can't believe we're already talking about the midterm. I know, we're halfway done with the class already. It's amazing how quickly this has gone, and I just want to say good job on the work that you're doing, and I'm excited to keep on going through the course with you. So a quick explanation video here about what I'm looking for the midterm. I think sometimes it's easier to hear it from me, what I'm looking for, rather than just read it. So this way you'll have an opportunity to do both. So I am in your midterm information module right now. And I'm going to click on the midterm assignment explanation. That's going to lay out sort of what I'm looking for in this assignment. So basically in this assignment, what you're going to do is you're going to have a discussion with two people. An interview, a discussion, whatever you want to call it. And you're going to pick two people to talk to about your own communication skills. So I'm going to pick two people, I'm going to sit down with them, I'm going to talk to them about my communication skills, and then I'm going to write up what happened and what my thoughts are about it. So the paper here says that you're going to meet with two people and discuss your communication skills. You should choose people with whom you communicate with frequently and whom you feel comfortable asking for critique or feedback or an honest dialogue about your communication skills. If you have the ability to pick one professional and one personal source, I highly recommend that, because then you can compare and contrast in those two social roles that you fill in your life. And if you don't have a professional source that you can tap into right now, that's okay. You can do two personal sources. So just giving you some ideas there. All right, so what you're going to do is you're going to sit down with one person and you're going to say, hey, let's talk about my communication skills. You might have some questions ready. You might just want to let it be more free-flowing in terms of a conversation. And you're going to ask them, I recommend you start out asking sort of some general questions as icebreakers. So like, hey, in general, what do you think about my communication skills? Hey, what do you think that I could improve on? So sort of some big things. And then I would try and narrow down a little bit more specific topics. Basically anything that we've covered in the course is fair game. So you might want to talk about listening. You might want to talk about your nonverbals. You might want to talk about your verbal communication. You might want to talk about if you do perception checks. As we move through the material, perhaps you'll want to talk about conflict. You might want to, if you're talking to someone who's an I, thou, or who is a particular other to you, you might want to dive into some of that attachment style stuff that we covered. As we get later on in the course, you might want to talk about, committed romantic relationships if you want to peek down to that material a little bit. So anything that we've talked about in the class is obviously fair game and beyond. Of course, if you want to think about anything beyond the confines of the class in terms of your communication, that's just fine. But basically, you're going to talk to two people and you're going to write up how that went. And the layout here is a suggested layout. You're welcome to do it in any way you want. I'm not as concerned with the layout of the paper as I am with the content of the paper. And so pick what works for you in terms of the structure. But basically what I want you to do is interview the person and then tell me in the first paragraph who you met with and then what sort of relationship you have with this person. So how long you've known them. Anything special I need to know. Just build some context for me around this. And then where did you meet? And I don't mean where did you meet in life. I mean where did you meet to do the interview, or where did you meet to have this discussion? Sometimes the environmental factors that surround us can influence our communication, and it's interesting for you to be able to think about that and see if that had any effect or influence on your discussion. So for instance, if you met your person that you were talking to in a really busy coffee shop to conduct this assignment interview, then maybe there was a lot of distractions happening, and maybe there was, physical noise or psychological noise happening that impeded you from having sort of the best experience you could have. You can also think about power dynamics. If you are interviewing someone in their office, if it's a supervisor or someone at your work and you're interviewing them, there's a power dynamic at play there, obviously, in terms of the physical setup and in terms of the relationship. So that structure might affect what communication happens inside of it. So that social structure might affect it. So something to think about and comment on if you if you see that fit. All right. So then you're going to talk about your interviews, your discussions, about the communication skills that you talked about, any strengths and weaknesses, any other aspects like listening or specific things that you talked about in terms of like course material or specifics within the bigger theme of communication. And then you can talk about, did you agree with what the person said? Did you disagree? Sort of like your general impressions on it. Now, some students will break this out. They'll tell me what happened in the discussion, and then they'll break out the reflections. Other students will incorporate them right in the writing. That's fine too. So they might say, I sat down with Bob, and Bob told me, when I asked him about my listening skills, he told me that they were really good, but that sometimes I looked like I was listening, but I really wasn't getting the content that he wanted me to get. So then what I want you to do is I want you to go, okay, we have a concept, we have a vocabulary now to discuss this in the paper from this course. So I want to see it like kind of 3 steps here. I want you to tell me what happened in the interview. I want you to link what you talked about, the things that you described and that you're hearing about, to the course material. So use the right concepts and theories here as you're working that material through, so that you can show me that what you talked about in your interview builds a bridge back to the material that we're learning. And then I want you to build a bridge to your own reflections. So based on what you know here, what do you think about that? Why are your communication skills like that? Do you agree? Do you disagree? So that's sort of a 3-part bridge there, right? You're going from what did we discuss in the interview to how is this relevant in our class? Are there any terms or theories or concepts that we've covered that really kind of hit home on the essence of what we talked about within this conversation or within this element of the conversation? And then lastly, what are your thoughts about that? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you have anything else to add? Or is there any other concepts you kind of want to bring in, or anything that it prompted you to think about? So that's what I'm looking for in terms of the connections that you're making in the paper. You can talk about, did you agree or disagree? Do you, why is that the case, do you think? And then lastly, as part of the interviews, I want you to, based on what you heard in your interviews and based on what you know about yourself, I want you to set some goals. So that means I want you to do both short-term and long-term goals as outcomes of these interviews. So that means that if you find out in both of your interviews that you're not a very good listener and you want to work on that, set some short-term and long-term goals to meet that, to make that skill better, okay? One of the things that I think probably if I were to do this interview would be paying attention while I'm listening. So instead of pseudo listening, really paying attention when I'm listening. And that might mean for me, a short-term goal is to put my phone away when I walk in the house and leave it away for an hour. And a long-term goal might be to not bring my phone into my bedroom at night, for instance, so that I don't sit on it in bed and scroll through it, but instead rather maybe talk to my husband. Okay, so that's an example of what you could do for a short-term and long-term goal. But I do want you to give specific short-term and long-term goals for this. All right, so then you're going to do the same thing for the second person you interview. You're going to talk about, who is this person? Give me some context. Talk about what you talked about. Again, be building those bridges through the writing. Here's the concept that we talked about here. We talked about, I'll keep with listening here. And then this is how this bridges to how this bridges to what we've learned about in class, or the specific concepts, theories, the vocabulary I have now to use that. And then lastly, like, what are my reflections on that? And then any goals that you want to set as outcome of those interviews. At the end of the paper, you can kind of summarize it with a nice little bow. You can say, all right, great, I've learned some lessons, here they are, I have some takeaways, and then you can let me know if there's any questions you were left with. So that's the gist of the paper here. Again, this is 4 to 5 pages. A lot of students think that's a lot, but actually when you start writing it, it's about, it's 2 pages per interview. So it's really not that much. The only structural piece I really want to talk about here is that I want you to have a narrative rather than, I don't want to see like a transcript of your interview. I don't want to see like question and answer. That's not what I want. I want a narrative. I want your explanations in there. I want you to talk about it in more of a paper format. All right, so if I go back out to the midterm information here, there we go. And I click on the midterm grading rubric, you will see basically what I just talked about. Are you incorporating specific concepts and terms from the course to help guide the writing and the interview process? So are you able to make those links from what you're talking about in those discussions and those interviews into here's how I can really incorporate specific concepts and terms and theories from the course. So that's what I'm looking for that knowledge category. For the comprehension, I just want to make sure that you are talking about a number of skills with each one of the people that you interview. I want to make sure that you've talked about your strengths, your weaknesses, and then this is a big category too for the goals. So did you set goals for the communication behaviors that you want to work on as an outcome of this assignment, and do you include both long-term and short-term goals? I'm not looking for 20 goals here. I'm looking for maybe 2 to 3 goals that you can work on. Let's be realistic about what we are capable of and what we really think is important here. So 2 to 3 goals is just fine with me as outcomes of these interviews. And then lastly, is your writing well done? Did you proof it? Do you have double spaces? Is it double spaced? Did you use paragraphs when you were writing? If you feel like writing is a challenge for you and this assignment seems a little daunting, you have some resources. You can use the Writing Center here on campus. You can also use Write in D2L. You have a tool called tutor.com. It's under resources right here. And there's something called tutor.com. If you click on that, you can connect to a live tutor at any point in time and ask for help with your writing, and you can show them the paper that you've written. You can also show them this rubric, and so they would look at that. You could also submit a paper for review. It's a great little tool. So if that's something that you struggle with typically, I would highly recommend using that. Each student has 15 hours in their account to use tutor.com. And so it's free for you as a student, so feel free to do that. And that covers a variety of disciplines as well, not just writing or communication. All right, so there's the rubric, and I know this video is getting long, so I'm going to go back to midterm information. The Dropbox for this assignment is here. It's open right now. I'll change that to right now, 8 a.m. But it's open, and so feel free to drop it in anytime. There's no penalty for getting it done early. But just make sure you know that it ends February 23rd at 10 p.m. If you have any questions, let me know. Obviously, reach out to me if there's any confusion on what you're supposed to be doing or if you're unsure about any elements. I'm happy to clarify, and I'll be checking in and reminding you about this stuff as well. All right, take care until next time.